One. Hi guys, my name is Lauren Hollows. Welcome back after a bit of a break, and I am lucky enough to be here today with Dr. Phil, also affectionately known to me as the granddaddy of vet. And I'm very excited. I've wanted to do this interview for a while. Phil and I catch up at least once a year. Phil has had a really distinguished dual career spanning over 50 years in both the military and the civilian sectors. He has served in the military in various capacities, including roles in communication and advisory positions to senior defence officials. Phil has also been instrumental in the creation and reform of some of the largest vet systems, particularly within the Australian Defence Force. Currently, as the training manager for defence projects at Nova Systems, Phil continues to advise the government and manage training programs that support introduction of critical defence capabilities. Welcome, Dr. Phil.
Wow, do I do all of that?
You do, and
That's
more,
that's a
I'm sure.
that's that's a busy life, isn't it? Hi, Lauren. Hi, viewers. It's great to be here. We've been trying to do this for some time now, and
So
finally we've
long,
done it.
so
It's great.
long.
Oh,
So
not that long. We're still young.
you've been in the defence sector as long as you've been in the vet sector, and
Yeah.
the defence package has like its own entire training package, and has so it's had a lot of kind of it's had really close ties with the vet sector for a really long period. Can you like talk to me a little bit about that
Sure,
and your experience in it?
sure, absolutely. What a lot of people won't know and probably don't realise is that vet actually comes out of defence. Now, I'll explain why. I've been involved in training adult education since in the mid 70s when I did the first of what I consider to have been the best train the trainer course ever. It was called the Methods of Instructional Training, and it was run by a person by the name of, what's his name again? Oh, I think you might know him, Peter Cosgrove. He was a captain in those days, not long back from Vietnam, Peter Cosgrove Military Cross, and he was running this wonderful course called MIT up in Sydney. It took 3 weeks, and it covered absolutely every aspect of what we now today call vocational education and training. In particular, and this really came home to me when I was in the UK in the early 90s, helping develop their NVQ system over there, is this notion of competency standards and competency-based assessment. I was thinking, what the heck is that? How does that differ from training objectives and learning objectives? And it suddenly struck me there one day that if you look at a set of competency standards and we look at a training objective in the military, they're exactly the same thing. Competency standards, we have we have a element, performance criteria, range of variables. Yes, we do have range of variables people who try and get rid of it, then the evidence guide and all that sort of stuff. You look at the military objectives and you have behaviors, standards, conditions. So we have behaviors, which is the element, standards, which is the performance criteria, conditions, which is a range of variables. In other words, what they do, the standard they do it to, and the conditions and the environment within which they do it. Competency standards. Exactly the same thing. Then I thought, well, if that's true, then what's competency-based assessment? Well, it's simply an assessment of someone's skills and knowledge as you're actually observing them and measuring them against a given set of standards. Now, as a young soldier, I did a couple of courses, my own promotion courses, and one of them I remember standing out on a very hot parade ground one day, being assessed on how well I can conduct a drill examination of someone else. Off to one side were a couple of warrant officers with a clipboard, big pink sheet of paper. On it, they had the standards already detailed. They were observing me performing the actions, and they were ticking them off against the standards on the sheet of paper. And then they would say to me, well, okay, Digger, why did you do it that way? Could you have done it this way? Are there other ways in which you could have done it? What's the background of that? Why do we do that? Why do we make people salute for 40 minutes? Why do we make them march around in a big square? Okay, because that's the underpinning knowledge that's gained. I've observed you doing the activity. I understand you can do it. You have got the underpinning knowledge. Competency-based assessment. So out of the military came this whole notion of vocational education and training. And it's what we've been developing ever since. When I wrote the national policies and guidelines on competency-based assessment for Australia back again in the mid-90s, that was the exact same processes that we see every day in military training. We have a set of standards which are common across every job. and wherever that job is performed, they're accepted, they're codified, and they're written down and they're adhered to. To understand whether or not a person's competent, we just view them doing the job against that standard, then ask them all the underpinning questions. Why did you do it that way? Are there other ways of doing it? Is there better ways of doing it? What would you do if something goes wrong? Very simple. So that is a brief history of what VET is and where it comes from. Where I've been applying it is that after the initial courses that I did under the person who became Sir General or General Sir Peter Cosgrove, I started applying that in the civilian world as well, and amazingly had amazing success. Other trainers would be trained towards a qualification, but I was training people towards a standard of competence required in their workplace first and foremost. And I continued to do that all the way through, right the way after I left the National Training Board in the mid-90s and started working with industry to help them understand what it is that they require out of a VET system and how they can get the best out of it. And I had amazing success all that time. I was also, when I was with the National Training Board in the mid-90s, I was also a captain at the time in the Army Reserve, and I was actually, as a civilian, I was advising generals and heads of division on how best to reform military training in the military. But I was also a captain down at the other end of the scale, applying this stuff. And a group at headquarters of Army headquarters said, well, look, why don't you come and work with us? Because you're here as a civilian Monday to Friday, telling us how to do it. Come in and do it for us and show us exactly what you mean. I said, wonderful. Because at the time I was also doing the same with Air Force and Navy. And I eventually got a commendation from Navy for the way we reformed their systems. So yes, that was a great idea. Sadly, though, what I found was massive roadblocks. And this primarily comes from an education background, academia background, of people who say, well, we're a trained school teacher, we know VET, we can do this stuff. So we don't need you here, an infantry captain from over there telling us how to do this stuff. I said, okay, you are going to have problems. And unfortunately, they did have problems because they're constantly taking an educational view of vocational education and training. So I stayed within the military there, but working up even higher levels, providing advice and guidance at defense level, I mean, major generals and lieutenant generals levels, and found that people at that end are very receptive, just as in the workplace. People at senior management are very receptive to these ideas. But it was when we got down to the level where the rubber meets the street, there was great roadblocks because people still felt, okay, I've got a school teacher background, therefore I know all about this, and policies were written around maintaining a qualification-based process rather than a competency-based process.
A lot of that boils down to an education, like the education brain is about filling a cup with knowledge, as opposed to, the vet, that vet training brain is about training the body and mind for skills.
Yes.
Is that kind of, because that seems to be, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I consistently see, whether it's working vet in schools or whether it's, working at the higher end with some of the more business stuff, is that separation of having knowledge and understanding. We need to, yes, there is some underpinning knowledge, but realistically, the key focus of vet, and I would imagine from a defense force perspective, having knowledge is important, but actually being able to train skills and apply skills in those particular environments, which is, has some knowledge that filters into it, but a lot of it is that situational, capacity, that there seems to be that really different, there's a fundamental kind of pushback in those two areas.
Yeah, totally agree. One of the problems that the military has, and they know this, I've told them this day after day after day, is that they train people for their rank and not their job. So people are trained, they go through officer training, they learn how to be an officer in a certain environment, and to maintain the leadership and all this sort of stuff, or they're trained to be an artificer, or to be a gunner, or to be a whatever. So they're trained for the rank that they hold, as opposed to the job that they do. Now, in I served in Vietnam, and one of the things that I saw over there is that it really doesn't matter what rank you were. If you could do the job, you were put in charge of the job. Anyone who's seen the film Zulu will know that we had an engineering officer who took over command of an infantry company because he was the best trained person to do the job. The infantry commander said, "Okay, I understand that. You are the better trained guy than I am. You look after everything." And he was quite happy to roll with that. And that's what happens in the real workplace. And it's the same in industry. We have people who are trained for their qualification and not their job. And we've lost that in the competency-based movement. It's now all about the qualification. Do you have a Cert 3? Do you have this? Do you have that? Therefore, you must be competent. Rubbish. And I've attended 2 court cases now where I've proved that being qualified and being competent are 2 totally different things. The unfortunate thing is that in the workplace, the best person will do the job, and they'll get the job done regardless of whether they're qualified to do that job or not. And that's the massive difference between the way we describe vocational as a pedagogical concept, when in reality it's an andragogical or a hortagogical concept where people will learn for themselves. If they don't know, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Now that's what my PhD was based around, placing vocational education, competency-based training in a sort of a complex environment. The realities of the workplace is that the workplace is extremely complex. There's a lot of chaos going on there from day to day. Anyone who's in the workplace will understand that nothing goes the way you expected it to go at the beginning of the day. And that's okay, as long as we know how to measure that. And we've got the skills and knowledge, as you say, the underpinning knowledge, to be aware that there are different ways of doing things.
Yeah.
That if I'm going down that track and I'm hit with a roadblock, I can go around it, I can go over it, I can stop, I can do a whole bunch of things. My qualification says I'm going to go straight through. Well, that's not the realities of the workplace. And it's the same in the military, it's the same in the working environment. And that is the problem that I have. And I explain this in my PhD. The problem that we have with this system is that it's designed around what is in this qualification, as opposed to what it really happens in the workplace. And that's where the competency-based movement has moved away from where we had in the 90s, that we focused solely on the workplace. Now we're focusing solely on TAFE or on qualification. And the regulators, as we're going to talk about shortly, is all about regulating people to ensure they're providing the qualification, as opposed to whether or not they're turning out people that can actually get work.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really interesting, because we're seeing, I read a report the other day that in the United States, there is 1 university closing every week at the moment. And, I think that certainly, like when I came up through the system, there was kind of a thing of, if you get a college degree, you will get a job, because the college degree was symbolic of you having a particular intelligence level and a skill set. And I think that we've now gotten to a point that, unfortunately, because of some changes within the higher education sector, and a desire to make sure that there's access across a wide range of areas, what we've done is we've actually diluted what that degree means, and we see so many people coming out of we see people coming out of year 12 that can't read. We've got education policies that say you cannot fail students. The only thing it's actually done, ironically, is fail students, in that we've got a year 12 with a waste that doesn't guarantee that they can read, and I've got a college degree. I've got a student, a person coming to me applying for a job with a college degree that I actually have no idea what skills they may or may not have, to, regardless of, like short of, if it says like, if it's a legal or if it's a medical degree, there's a few of those areas in like the STEM, but like a degree no longer means, yes, you're going to have X, Y, and Z skills anymore. And I think as I said, we've seen that from the primary education system. We see it in the higher education system. the not wanting to fail students, not wanting to hurt feelings is resulting in a complete walk away
Yeah.
from making sure people have skills. Can you read? Can you write? Can you
Yeah.
can you add 2 plus 2?
Mm.
And it's really, I mean, it's unfortunately left I think it's leaving a lot of students in the position. I know that in my son's 16, 17, I've said to both of my boys, don't go and get a university degree. It's
Mm.
completely, like it's not gonna get you a job. Find a trade, get a trade, go and do a trade, go and do like learn how to be an electrician, a plumber,
Mm.
because then I know that you will always have work. Um,
Yes.
and then we've got to then we have to look to the vocational sector and go, but how well are we teaching
Mm.
those skills? And are
Mm.
we bringing too much in from the education sector? Are we filling them up too much with knowledge and not
Mm.
actually giving them the skills to
Yeah.
cope on the ground?
See, I totally agree with what you're saying, and we saw that so often. And you recall the discussions that we've had over the years about why a VET trainer should suddenly become a school teacher teaching LLN, language, literacy, and numeracy. Why is somebody now being told, okay, your RTO is going to be measured by on how well you are providing these LLN subjects? Now I find that absolutely horrendous. That suddenly people in school do not have sufficient language and literacy skills to enter the workforce. Now that's one problem, but I see an opportunity there, because if we go back to looking at competency-based training and assessment as designed around the workplace, then we may very well find that there are jobs where people do not need a year 12 education. They may not even need to speak English, because the instructions are all in Chinese or whatever. So as long as they've got those language skills, they can read the signs, or they can read the safety signs, they can understand instructions, that they can do, that they have sufficient language and numeracy skills to do the job as per the standards, then why must they go through and do all of the year 12? Now we see it over and over again where we have, for example, a university course or a TAFE course that says it must be 12 months long, but the actual learning is only 6 months. So what do we do for the other 6 months? We pad it out. Every course that you see, every university course you'll see, the first semester is all about how to do study, how to conduct research. That's the first semester. Now, of course, you can get RPL or you can get credits for that if you've done other courses, but it starts off with the padding. Like it goes for 12 months, so therefore we'll pad out the first 6 months and then we'll give you the real stuff at the end. That's
I think
wrong.
that takes us into a really good point. I'm going to cut you off there for a second, guys. I am here with Dr. Phil Rutherford. If you want to keep watching this conversation, we're going to talk all about the current state of it just next. My name is Lauren Hollows for NOI Education, and we will see you next time.